Welcome to the Humans Against Poor Scholarship Summer Grant Interviews. Each one of our interviewees is competing for a $2,000 grant to help fund their summer research. Do you want to have a say in who gets funded? Become a HAPS donor today by visiting www.hapsfund.com/donate. Good morning, everybody. Happy Mother's Day to those mothers in the United States and to those mothers not in the United States. Have a happy Mother's Day anyway. Welcome back to the Digital Hammurabi channel. Today we are finishing up our Egyptology interviews. So we have 4 Egyptology students to talk to about their research. So let's dive right in. Hi, how are you? Thank you so much for joining us.
Hi, thank you. Thank you very much. I'm fine. You?
Yes, very well, thank you. Would you mind introducing yourself and telling us where you're studying?
Yes, my name is Lorenzo Guardiano. I am a Ph.D. student in Egyptology at the University of Milan in Italy.
Thank you very much, Lorenzo. Very briefly, could you maybe tell the audience how you got into Egyptology?
Yes, my current research interests concern astronomical and cosmological sealings in the tombs and temples in Egypt from the New Kingdom, so 16th, 11th century before Christ.
Oh, no, please carry on.
There are two types of these sealings. On one end, the oldest ones contain the maps of the sky with lists of decans, planets, and constellations used by the Egyptian to measure the hours of the night, and the representation of the noted constellations with their associated dates, and sometimes lunar and solar calendars. On the other hand, in the Ramessid tombs and the Osirian, we have the so-called books of the sky that are special compositions that describe the path of the sun in the night and day sky through the different area of the cosmos in the 12 hours of the night.
Thank you. How did you get interested in Egyptian astrology?
Because during my master's degree, I've attended a course of Egyptian philology based on the books of the sky, but I love so much astronomy, so I liked it very much. And so I decided to spend my master thesis on one of these compositions, the so-called dramatic text of the Abydos, that speaks about the stars in the period of invisibility of 70 days. It's very, very interesting because Egyptian linked this period of invisibility of the decans with the period of embalming of the deceased in the embalmer hall. So there is, it was a mythological and astrological composition. Then when I got my PhD, I decided to study all these compositions in the ceilings, in the astronomical ceilings of the New Kingdom, because a very beautiful piece of art.
Thank you. And you partially answered this already. Did these decorative paintings in the tombs have a ritual aspect, or was it just recording knowledge or simply decoration?
Naturally, they are important for the ritual aspect of the death, because in the Ramessid tombs, in the tombs of the Valley of the Kings, so the royal tombs of the pharaohs of the 19th and 20th dynasty, the theology connected the sovereign with the solar god. So the path that sun, when the sun crosses the sky in the nighttime, at the same time the pharaoh crosses the afterlife as the sun in the solar bark to rebirth in the morning, every time, every day in the eternity. So for this reason, they are a summa of theological knowledge, but even of astronomical knowledge of this area. when Egyptologists discovered them, they think that they are just fantasy of priests. But in the 1930, with Alexander Piankov, we began to understand the meaning of these hieroglyphs, of these texts, and we discovered the beautiful significance of the astronomical aspects that concern, on one hand, the course of the stars and the moon and the sun, on the other hand, the history of theology of Egypt.
Fantastic. Thank you. So these sound like really very important things to be studying. What are your particular summer plans that you're hoping we can help you out with?
Actually, I applied for another subject of research because a few months ago, by chance, I discovered that in the University of Milan, in the Historical Archive, we have a beautiful scroll of papyrus called the Busca Papyrus. This papyrus contains a version of the Book of the Dead of a certain Ptahmose, scribe and draftsman of the 19th dynasty, so 14th century before Christ, in the Theban area. He was the son of the judge Osiris and of the singer of Amun, Didia. The name Busca goes to the man who brought this papyrus to Italy. He was the Marquis of Lomagna, Carlo Ignazio Busca Arconati Visconti, that in 1826 got a campaign in Egypt, and he found a sarcophagus, a lid, a mummy, and a funeral papyrus. But he didn't know, but it was pastiche of 19th century, because the sarcophagus and the lid were dated to the late period. The mummy was a Greco-Roman mummy, and the funeral papyrus was a 19th dynasty papyrus. He brought then all these pieces of this collection to his home in Rome, but on his death, his son Lodovico, who was very superstitious, wanted to get rid of the mortuary collection of his father. So the pieces took different ways, and after various vicissitudes, most of them unclear, the papyrus was acquired by the University of Milan. And in 1836, the young Karl Richard Lepsius studied it. He partially transcribed this scroll. When 50 years later, Edouard Naville wanted to include it in his edition of the Book of the Dead, he cannot find it because he searched it in the Busca's home in Rome, but he didn't know that this papyrus was in University of Milan. So he had to rely on the partial transcriptions of Lepsius. From that period on, we have not an Egyptological edition of this papyrus. I think that it's very important to study it, to know the meaning of the formulas, the different formulas of the Book of the Dead, but even to understand the meaning of the images of this papyrus. It is a 6 meters long papyrus, so very, very beautiful.
Wow, that's a long and impressive history for a single papyrus. When you're talking about the Book of the Dead, could you give our audience, who may not be terribly familiar with it, just a brief overview of exactly what that is?
Yes, of course. I said that I study the books of the sky. This is the Book of the Dead. All this text, all this composition, because they are a mix of text and images, are part of the Egyptian funerary literature that begins in the Old Kingdom with the pyramid texts. So some formulas in the roof of the pyramids. In the Middle Kingdom, these formulas begins the coffin text, and in the New Kingdom, they took two different ways. The Book of the Dead in one hand and the books of afterlife in the other hand. The books of the sky are part of the books of the afterlife. The Book of the Dead in particular really interesting because describes what happened to the deceased after his death. He had to be judged by Osiris and so on. So if the books of the sky regards just the pharaohs, the Book of the Dead can be used by everything that have a tomb. So it could be written in different materials, in papyri, just like in this case, in the amulets, in the mummy itself, in the bandages, in the sarcophagus, and so on. The Busca Papyrus is interesting because contains some formulas that generally are found in the amulets. As the Book of the Dead is considered as the Bible of ancient Egypt because it summarizes all the knowledge about afterlife in the New Kingdom.
Fascinating, thank you. And you mentioned that there are obviously several different copies, papyri copies of this book, and then it turns up on bandages and in amulets. Do the different copies differ substantially one from the other?
Yes, beginning in the New Kingdom with the 19th dynasty, the Books of the Dead use very different materials and so different formulas. Some formulas are ascribed in the amulets and not in papyri and so on. But in the 26th dynasty, in the late period, the priest took philological edition of this Book of the Dead, canonic edition, with some static formulas. But in the New Kingdom, every papyrus is different from another. One of the most important papyri containing the Book of the Dead is the Papyrus of Ani. It was already studied. The Busca Papyrus has not been studied, so I don't know what precisely contained, but it's interesting to discover it.
That sounds very interesting. Thank you. We have an audience question. Zebra says, I understand that translations of the Book of the Dead have become more sophisticated since the days of E.A. Wallace Budge. Can you tell us how translations have improved over time, or is that too big a question?
It's a very interesting question. Budge considers some papyri, not all the papyri, not all the amulets. So, for example, the Busca Papyrus is not considered in the Budge edition. So, and there are several papyri or several amulets that have to be studied yet. So the study has to improve, to continue. Yes.
Has the changing understanding of ancient Egyptian language changed how scholars see the Book of the Dead, or has that remained fairly consistent?
In this type of compositions were used till the late period and the Greco-Roman era, and so the language changed a lot. And even the writing changed. We can study the handwriting of some scribes, for example. And it is very interesting that in Turin, in the Museo Egizio of Turin, there is a papyrus of the Book of the Dead with some spaces in different points of the edition, because these scrolls are made as industrial product. So when a private buy one scroll, he has to add his name in the spaces.
Thank you very much. We are about out of time. So, Lorenzo, thank you so much for joining us and for telling us about your research.
Thank you.
We'll be in touch in a couple of weeks.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Bye. Okay, everybody, that was Lorenzo, who is going to be studying a Book of the Dead that is currently housed in the University of Milan, which sounds wonderful. We're going to take a brief break to make sure that all of our applicants have the same amount of time to get their research across. So stay with us. We'll be back in a couple of minutes. Hello, everyone. We are ready to get back to our interviews. So without further ado, we have our second guest. Good morning. Thank you for joining me.
Good morning. I'm
Could
really
you
happy to be
please...
here. Yeah.
Oh, thank you. Could you please introduce yourself and tell us where you are currently studying?
Yeah, yes, of course. So, I'm currently studying history at the University of Novi Sad, that's in Serbia. Previously, I've got my BA and MA in Belgrade, history, also in history, and then I spent some time trying to get a PhD in Prague at the Czech Institute of Egyptology at the Charles University. Unfortunately, some health issues happened, and I needed to quit for a short time, and hopefully I'm getting back to my research very soon. No, I'm enrolled in PhD program, so yeah, I'm back on track. as I said.
Wonderful. Well, congratulations. I'm glad you managed
Thank
to
you.
get back to it. What is your particular area of research?
I'm interested in basically in history, archaeology, and art history of first millennium BCE Egypt. So basically during the time when the New Kingdom collapsed, so the like the glorious period in history of Egypt collapsed, and Egypt became fragmented and eventually became that was the time of foreign rulers of Egypt, first with Persians and later Greeks and eventually Romans. And that's basically something that I'm interested in. So the establishment of these foreign empires in Egypt, and of course how this was perceived by priests of Egypt. So yeah, there's a lot of things to be considered in this type of research. So my main methodological framework is that I'm using all prosopography, onomastics, and genealogy as my main methodology. So prosopography is a study of persons, then onomastics studies personal names, and at the end we have genealogy as the establishments of the family tree of certain people. So my focus is on identification of individuals and also the reconstruction of social interrelations um, among priesthood. Why priesthood? Because priests are the best attested individual social group that we have. That most of the objects that we have in our that we have all over the world, unfortunately, is has been made for the people who had some titles or were connected to some temples. So also my geographical focus is on Lower Egypt. Unfortunately, Lower Egypt is mostly not well preserved today. There's a lot of temples that we only have like the foundations, nothing more. And of course, most of the objects that were once at these temples are scattered all over the world in private and museum collections or antiquity markets. So so this is also understudied in the among all periods of history of Egypt. So we have a lot of studies until 7th century BC, and then a lot of studies from 4th century BC. But unfortunately, between 7th and 4th century, there's not much of interest, unfortunately, except if this is not connected to Upper Egypt and to Thebes, especially because a lot of original contexts are luckily preserved for Thebes, but for example, Memphis, which is the second or at least the main administrative and royal capital of these periods, we are not having much of evidence there. So that's the reason why I'm trying to study this particular period and also this particular geographical area. So Memphis is one of my primary interests on, and but I'm also interested in other areas of Nile Delta primarily. So Buto, Sais, Letopolis, Heliopolis. So all of those kind of famous cities or well-known cities, but understudied, and there's a lot of new evidence and a lot of new information that we can get from all these sources.
That sounds like a fantastic area of research and awful lot of work. Sounds like it needs to be done. So you said you were looking at tracing individuals in the priesthood. Was the priesthood like a family business? Do you see a lot of
yes,
like fathers and sons?
Yes.
Yeah.
Basically, we have this, especially well attested during the New Kingdom, so that already started this type of a goal. So the main goal of a priest is for his family to be connected to the temple, so to be employed by the temple
Hmm.
in various capacities. So being a priest or administrative positions, or anything that could be connected to the temple. So their main goal was to place their descendants there, and but in the during the New Kingdom, that was a little bit different. So we have this very well attested, as I said, but unfortunately, but there are other areas of the state there where these people can be employed by king or something like that. But
Hmm.
in the first millennium BC, the temple, in my opinion, became the main pillar of the statehood, in a sense. So no matter if the pharaoh is Egyptian or non-Egyptian, the temple stays the same. So there's a lot of assumptions that you know different political breaks, like invasions, over or wars between dynasties or between individuals, or so foreign rules and something like that, are all of these um, uh, types of interactions
Hmm.
were not actually um, have much of the effect on temples. So people are staying there, and they're just doing what they're supposed to be, to preserve the millennium old um, traditions and
Hmm.
culture. And that's what I'm trying to test, to see if we can see lots of continuities, which exactly families are participating, and for how long. That's the main question, because we have different families attested in our sources, and that's the main reason why I'm conducting this research, to see what is happening within the temple, within the um, yeah, with those families and individuals that are there. So we do have couple of eras within first millennium, where for example, the 26th dynasty, where the state is revived. So we
Hmm.
have this like a local dynasty that rules all over the Egypt, and that's a little bit different. But afterwards, the Persian conquest, and different other political breakdowns during the 4th century and 5th century, and then coming of Alexander the Great and the Ptolemaic era. So I'm trying to connect these eras by researching the social history and the temples especially.
That is fantastic. Thank you so much. What are your specific plans for the summer, and how do you think CAPS funding will help?
Yeah, so I need to say that a miracle has happened in March 2021. Before that, that was basically the reason why I had a little problems with
Hmm.
myself and with my studies. The main material that could help us, or can help us researching priesthood um, in the Lower Egypt, especially, is the so-called Serapeum stele. So these are monuments dedicated to the divine Apis bull of Memphis, connected to the burials of the Apis bull, and they were put to the underground corridors of the temple called Serapeum, where these bulls were buried.
Hmm.
And unfortunately, most of these stele were unpublished, or are still unpublished, and they're located mostly in a Louvre museum. So the first volume of these stele was published in 1968. Previously, it was studied for the last time in 1903.
Wow.
So after the publication of the first volume of this catalog of these monuments in 1868, the publication and the interest of the Egyptologists, or the researchers in general, stopped, because nobody was actually having the access to these stele in Louvre, and a lot of promises were made during
Hmm.
these years that it's going to be published this year, that year, and
Just
we
didn't
we were,
materialize.
yeah, just didn't. And we were in 2000. I started researching that in 2013, 14. And I was in contact with the Louvre for for many years, and I succeeded in getting 30% of the material, but I need,
Wonderful.
of course,
Yeah.
I needed more.
Hmm.
And in March this year, uh, Louvre Museum put whole collection online with high quality photographs and with all the necessary information about the provenance and the where they were found, and
Hmm.
something like that, which was unknown before, and that was like a main trigger for me to resume my prosopographical
Hmm.
interests. And my plan for the summer is to um, try to go through all these material and to see what new information I can get, because this is little more than 600 stele
Wow.
from basically from the 26th dynasty, or from the 7th century BCE until the Roman conquest. So this is really good time
Hmm.
for me to do what I was planning to do, all these years before. So this is the perfect opportunity for me to do that and to resume my research. Unfortunately, I'm kind of unfunded, and
Hmm.
also I'm working in one IT company, but that's hopefully is just like a temporary, and
Hmm.
I will be back to my research and to my studies, because I need to underline this is the first time that something like that is finally possible
Hmm.
for us to do, to try to get all of these information that will help us in better understanding of this period, which is usually, the research on this period was usually impersonal. So it's we have kings, and we have armies, and we have like general knowledge, but we don't know nothing about the people who, like a large group of people who is participating, who participated in all of these events. So
Hmm.
that's the
Well, that is
main
wonderful.
reason.
I'm
Yeah.
I'm so glad that you have access to all that material now. And we
Yeah.
have about 2 minutes left, and I have an audience question for you. What role does social network analysis and network mapping of ancient texts play in Egyptology? Do we have enough texts from this period to be helpful?
Yes, of course, that's the next step. Unfortunately, we social network analysis is still new in Egyptology, so we do know that it have a lot of in history, in historical research, social network analysis is started to arrive in the 90 during the 90s especially, and but in Egyptology it started in the last 10 years. So yes, we do have much information about different families, and the social network analysis can help us immensely in mapping all of these interrelations, for example, marriages, for example, naming patterns, all of these interesting significant ideas can be successfully integrated into the with the social network
Hmm.
analysis.
Well, wonderful. Thank you so much for joining us and for telling everyone about your research. It sounds
Thank you.
fascinating.
Thank you very much.
And I'll be in touch in a couple of weeks.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye bye.
Okay, that is amazing. I love hearing when people have access to materials that they desperately need. So, 600 stele over the course of a summer. That is an impressive undertaking. Okay, we have about 5 minutes before our next guest will come and tell us about their research. So, stay tuned. We'll be right back. And welcome back, everybody. We have our next guest ready and waiting. Hello, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
Of course. Could you just introduce yourself and tell us where you're currently studying?
So I'm Kimberly Watts. I just finished writing my PhD in Egyptology at the University of Cambridge. I am currently based in Cairo, where I'm teaching as a high school teacher.
Very cool. Thank you. How did you get into Egyptology?
So when I was 8 years old, I had a primary school teacher, who taught us about ancient Egypt, studying the gods, making ID cards for Egyptology, for Egyptian gods and goddess. And so I had to study that. I remember drawing something small. This is my ID. And I had to find all the information that was relevant. And that was it. We did a bit more of ancient Egypt, but nothing more. And a few weeks, months later, we had a school trip to Paris to see the Louvre Museum and the Egyptian collection in the Louvre. The content of the lesson plus the Louvre Museum, that sort of triggered a kind of love. And then my parents were always very kind and actually enabling this love. And my grandmother would literally take me every time I would go visit her in Paris. She would just, let's go to the Louvre. Okay. So that's it.
Wonderful. It's always lovely to hear when people's families are so supportive of their passions when they're children. What are your specific research interests within Egyptology?
So for my PhD thesis, I examined the administration and the role of officials in the construction of like monumental temples and tombs. So the big temples and the big tombs, and how the official inscription always say, I am the king, I made this temple. Well, I'm looking at the people actually organizing the making of the temple. So all the administration, so it's specific, like Ninad was talking about prosopography and onomastics. Well, I study the same kind of material with the function that people work with and how they, the job that they have. I studied that and I looked at all the information, the activities they had, put it together, and I created a narrative that sort of is different for every single official and time frame and everything. But what were the duties of these officials in real on the ground? And that's it. And so I looked at the people who were organizing the construction and the people organizing the acquisition of all the materials, mostly from Egypt and Nubia. So Nubia is the part of Egypt that is south of Aswan and now modern Sudan, and a lot in Sinai, and further east with lapis lazuli coming from Afghanistan from 5,000 years ago already.
So what kinds of roles did these officials have, and how well did they correlate to maybe what they told people they were doing? Was there a lot of exaggeration, or were they pretty truthful about their personal input?
So that's actually difficult to assess on the aspect of, we have the official text say, I am the king, I made this. It's a very opportunistic behavior when you see an official that sort of, he's in a very remote place, he's going to add his person behind, said, I was here, that's it. So that's actually the focus of my next research. So that's it. But so the officials that we have all the information, but it sort of correlates quite well because we see that in the period I was studying, which is the beginning of the New Kingdom, mostly the 18th dynasty. So that's the period with Tutankhamun, Akhenaten, Hatshepsut, Amenhotep III, Tutmosis III, and we have big construction programs in that time. And so we see that the details of each official sort of like they combine, and like the details of one make the details of another one a bit legitimate, and that it correlates.
So kind of better understanding one helps fill in the gaps for another one.
That's it.
And then
like
when you look
the details
as a
of
whole,
one are going to fill the gaps of the other.
I see. Fantastic. So what are your particular summer research plans, and how can HAPS funding help you with them?
So When I finished, I was finishing and writing in my last chapters of my PhD. I realized that very few people were going to read this book. Even when I wrote scientific articles, my family, they had no desire to read them because it contains too much data. They were only interested in narrative and the end result, which makes sense. So I decided to transform all the knowledge I'd learned and combined it into like a story that people could easily understand and change their perception of ancient Egypt and some of the activities that were held at the time. And so rather than telling them, oh, here, read my PhD thesis, I decided to give them the narrative directly. And as a result, I decided to write a children's book.
Wonderful.
So it's a story of a 10, 12 years old boy in ancient Egypt during the reign of Amenhotep III, so around 1400 BC. He gets involved in the construction of a temple for the king. All the details of the histories and the lives of the people I studied, well, I combined them and I put them together and created this person, this kid. And he does not exist. So this boy is I called him Menkhieper, which if you know ancient Egypt, Menkhieper is the name of Thutmose III. He has a personality, he has fears, a best friend, and a dog. So I wanted to be able to share all that detail. But what is archaeology is all about making the knowledge which I had discovered available to everyone. So I wrote this book already. I have the first draft. It needs some edit. And I did that mostly after I finished the first version of my PhD. Then I had a break, had to do correction. Then I started teaching. Since I started teaching, it's been very difficult for me to go back into it because I have very little time. So, but the writing is, I would say, at 95% finished. But ideally, I would like the HAPS scholarship to be able to fund myself, to be able to focus on the fact that I'm going to be working on this, but also to pay some illustrators, some professional illustrators, to have some preliminary artwork to be able to submit later on to a publisher. I'm thinking also of translating the book right now. It's written in English. I'm considering translating into French and paying an Egyptian translator whom I know already to translate into classical Arabic to make that knowledge available to an English, French, and Arabic audience. That's it. And
That's
so it
fantastic.
would be partly to fund these people. And one of the illustrators I would like to work with, I've already been in touch with her about this and another project, actually. She's a professional archaeological illustrator. And that is a major benefit for me because if I tell her, oh, this is going to be setting in a house, Egyptian house, I'm not going to have a brick and chimney.
Yes. She'll get the feel.
She'll get the gist
More
because she studied
correct.
Egyptology also.
Yes.
And she works in the field in Egypt also. So
This sounds like a really fascinating and valuable project. Was it very difficult to condense all the information you have and all the knowledge you've gained down into understandable language for a children's book?
So, I mean, this is not all the knowledge.
What? Fair.
This is
A small fraction.
So actually, that was not so difficult. It was more like the timeline was harder to come up with, and like how to make the story a bit less linear and more interesting, rather than just he begins and he finishes. The details of how this kid suddenly gains this position of quite high official by accident, literally, his father breaks his leg, so. That was easy, but it was because putting all the details, it helped me think also about how I was seeing the function. And I've had to fill in some gaps, like we're talking about the menu of a celebration, a massive festival. I've looked at a lot of recipes of ancient Egypt and the text to identify what vegetables and fruits and meat was served, and because that is definitely not my area of expertise. But that's as this is the 5% I still have to do in writing, is find some details of, because I want it to be really archaeologically and historically completely accurate. If I don't know the answer, I will change the story to make it to not lie, simply.
That makes a lot of sense. So what for you then was the most enjoyable part of this project?
Reading it to other people so far.
Have you
I've
had
really
very good
enjoyed.
responses?
Sorry?
Have you had good responses?
I had good responses. I've read it to a couple people. I've used my father and my stepfamily as guinea pigs for my PhD thesis also, to be honest. So that, and I have a couple friends already who have kids a bit younger than the target age, but maybe by the time I'm finished, they'll be the right age. They who are interested in reading it themselves, and I have a friend of mine who are the right age group, so primary school mostly. Teachers. I have a friend of mine who are teachers for that age group who are actually quite keen on reading it and giving me feedback on, oh, I think this is too complicated, or you have to summarize that, or they're not going to understand this aspect. So that's been going well. I've been working with them. I said, like when I have 2 weeks of holiday, I take a bit of time to unwind. And then I think, oh, I need to progress in this. And so I do 2 days, and then suddenly I start back work and teaching again. And because I do teaching work, and on top of that, I do research work. So that's it.
It must be very difficult to juggle all of your different professional commitments and find time for everything that you need to do.
Yes.
Well, we don't have any questions from the audience, but we have people saying that the book is an absolutely fantastic idea. So they're interested, at least.
That's good. But that's actually one of the reasons why I wanted to do a children book. Because, we've all seen and probably bought these Leodians, like what we call, at least in England, coffee table books. And they're great, but they only very few people actually will read them. They're beautiful books with amazing pictures usually and very interesting content. But I wanted to be able to have an impact on the people from the start, and not in a more passive way. This is not a book to learn about ancient Egypt. This is a book because this is a novel. This is a story. And through that, children are going to learn. The parents also reading it to their children. And hopefully maybe even the teachers thinking, oh, this is actually good material, or even recommending it or something. This is the way I've been thinking it. And so on the end of the book, there's actually going to be the raw data. Sorry. The narrative without the fiction included, so that they understand that this actually comes from an actual research of, well, this is obviously the work, this is what they did. We know this and this and this and that. This is the way I've thought about it, making the entire fiction the center of the book. And it's for temple that may exist. I mean, that probably existed, but the advantage, it makes my job easier, is that there's absolutely nothing left of it. Ninad was talking about how some temples were gone. Well, I don't even have a foundation of it. We know it existed, but there's nothing left. So it means that I was able to create a temple that sort of fitted the design of what I wanted to be able to say, with special doors and the ramps and everything. Not more plausible, like less tricky. I mean, I didn't want to invent, but that's actually what I'm doing. I mean, I'm inventing the most plausible guess. So that's it. That's the way I designed it. And that's why I picked that site. It's a site I like also. I've excavated there. And that's it.
Fantastic. Well, we are at time. So, Kimberly, thank you so much for coming and telling us about your work and your project. And I wish you the best of luck.
Thank you for inviting me.
Of course, we'll be in touch in a couple of weeks.
Well, thank you. Well, have a very good day.
Thank you. You too. Bye.
Bye.
Okay. This is a fantastic session of interviews. We've got all kinds of things going on. And we have one more person to talk to. And I'm going to wait for her to join us. So I will be back in a minute. And we are back. Hello again, everyone. We have our fourth and final applicant for today. Hello, thank you so much for joining me.
Hello.
Could you please introduce yourself and tell us where you're studying?
My name is Katherine Rouse. As you can see, I'm a very mature student, and I am currently, I finished my master's degree with Trinity St David, University of Wales, last December, and then I started a PhD here in Liverpool last October.
Fantastic, thank you very much. And what is your particular area of research?
At the moment, for my master's dissertation, I did the cult of Antinous in Egypt. So I had so much more that I wanted to put into that thesis that I decided I wanted to expand upon what I was doing there, make it sort of Europe-wide, Roman Empire-wide, as it were. Also, I was quite fascinated by the fact that even though there is such a great deal of statuary connected with the cult, the actual cult itself is often overlooked in books on Roman religion. It's far outstripped by Isis and Serapis. There are so many links with mystery religions, which obviously get quite a lot of press in those books. So I wanted to explore more those links with the mystery religions and readdress that sort of shortfall that we find in scholarly tomes, and at the same time look at some of the anti-Christian polemic as well.
Fantastic, thank you. Could you just give us a brief overview of the cult?
Oh, well, from what, again, there isn't a huge amount of evidence, material evidence, apart from the large statues. There are things. So from what can be ascertained, it was similar to some of the mysteries in that it had there was a dream incubation. It was a healing cult. So that seems to be the main thing about it. There was games attached to it. So in Antinopolis and in Eleusis and a couple of other places in Greece, and also in Bithynia, there was a games attached to it. So it seems to have been a very, very busy cult. Also, there are in Egypt, perhaps the success of the cult can be seen in some of the mummy labels that we have. In that people are some of the mummy labels say "son of Antinous" and such a thing. Also, on some papyri, they found other evidence of Greeks in Egypt with the name Antinous. But the cult actually in Egypt seems to have a hybrid form with Antinous merged with Osiris as Osir Antinous, and also but also at the same time very Greek in culture, in character. But in the wider empire, we see it been in a purely Greek fashion. Also, Hadrian in Tivoli, he had images of Antinous in his Egyptian Osiris mode, as it were, but they always seem to me sort of like some sort of Disney-esque images, as it were. So it was I would say probably it was some kind of mystery cult. It would probably come into the mystery cult areas, but there is actually not enough to perhaps say whether, it was definitely a mystery cult, as it were.
I see. Thank you. And I know you said there isn't an awful lot of physical evidence. Do you have a feel for how widespread the cult's presence was?
Oh, yes. I mean, there is evidence that the cult spread to, there are evidence that the cult spread to over 70 cities in the Roman Empire, of which Mantinea in Greece was probably the main one, that Pausanias writes at length about that. Also, there was a beautiful statue of Antinous that was found at Eleusis. There's another one found at Delphi. And so there are all these links with major religious centers as well.
And do you think that this is as a result of having the emperor for a patron, or was it simply that the people found this cult to be particularly compelling?
Difficult to say, but probably it helped a great deal. Obviously, Hadrian was a great Hellenophile, and keen to spread the Greek culture throughout the empire. So there is some school of thought that suggests that he used the cult of Antinous as a means of this Hellenization of the empire, but the actual cult itself started in Egypt, but there was a very big Greek presence in Egypt as well. So it sort of initially started there and then spread empire wide.
Fascinating, thank you. And do you know if it was practiced by a particular social group of people? I know, for example, Mithras was often associated with soldiers.
Yeah.
Do we have a similar kind of association?
Well, it seems that, I mean, from the idea that it was perhaps a healing cult of some kind, it seems to, and the fact that there was sports games attached to it, seems to have had a very, very wide appeal. That's something that I thought it had a very wide appeal when I was initially doing some research. But one of the major pieces of material culture that was found in Antinopolis was a very, very fine mummy portrait of two men, and they both got Greek gods on their shoulders. One is Osiris Antinous and the other one is Hermanubis. And so clearly this is a very, very fine painting, so clearly from quite an elite. Also in Greece there is the villa of Herodes Atticus, and they've found a very unusual statue there of a seated Antinous, and there seems to have been some kind of little shrine or chapel there to him as well. So probably a very mixed, broad appeal.
Wonderful, thank you. What are your particular summer plans, and how do you think HAPS will be able to help you?
Well, I think as I wrote in the little blurb that I sent to you, I'm hoping, but it's not happening this year, I'm hoping to do the epigraphy course, which is a postgraduate epigraphy course which the British School at Athens run, and they're not planning on running that till 2022 now, like everything else. But I'm completely self-funded. My master's degree was self-funded, and so is the PhD. And so any help would be grateful, really, towards fees and things. I've been very unlucky that when I was doing halfway through my master's degree, it was student loans were available for master's students. And I missed out on that because of my age. And then it was extended to doctoral students, and I just missed out on that because of my age as well.
That's appalling. I'm so sorry to hear that. The state of funding is already bad, and doing things like putting age limits on it, I think, just makes the whole thing even more impossible. We do have a quick question from the chat. Someone is asking, do you have an online presence, or is any of your work online for people to read?
I don't. No, I don't.
Absolutely not a problem. I can't say I blame you. So how will the epigraphy class help you with your research?
Well, what I've done is my initial degree 40 years ago was ancient history and biblical studies. So then I learnt Koine Greek, and I absolutely loved it. Obviously, lost it over the years through my teaching career and so on. So basically, when I started last October, I decided that I was going to relearn Greek again. This time I'm relearning classical Greek. And I just really want to, obviously the ability to translate inscriptions off is fantastic. And I want to get to that stage where I'm comfortable doing that.
Wonderful. And I'm just going to give you some questions because the audience is being uncharacteristically quiet at the moment. Okay. So you said there are obviously statues that help us understand the cult of Antinous. What other material remains are there that can help with this research?
Well, this is it. There isn't a great deal. In Egypt, you have, as I said, I mentioned that mummy portrait. That until very recently, that mummy portrait was that the god on the shoulder of the young man in the picture was identified as somebody, as another god. There are other little bits of statuary in Egypt which showing Antinous in Egyptian mode. Which again was previous. There's one in the museum in Alexandria, which was previously identified as one of the Ptolemies. So who knows how many bits lurking in the storerooms of museums are, either unidentified or misidentified. And you've also got the fact that the statues of Antinous are Antinous was merged with so many different gods, like Dionysus in particular, but the question of identification there as well. But there is a distinctive look, as it were.
And is there a lot of written evidence that helps with this, or not so much?
Not a great deal, no. So there is the little bits and pieces in particularly the account about Mantinea in Pausanias. There is little bits and pieces in the histories about Hadrian and so on. And a lot of our knowledge of the cult comes through the anti-Christian, the anti-pagan Christian polemic, as it were.
Very interesting. Thank you. We have one question and then I will let you go and get on with your afternoon. Zebra says, I often imagine various cults existing in part for locals to do what is today called networking. Is there any truth to this?
I would say that there's quite a lot of truth in that. Obviously every religion, be it Christian, Jewish, or ancient, has a social aspect to it, and so yes, most definitely.
Certainly when I grew up in a small village in rural Buckinghamshire, and the highlight of the social week was going to church and having a cup of tea with everyone afterwards.
Exactly. And the cult of Antinous had games attached to it. What better way to bring loads of people together?
Precisely. Well, Katherine, thank you so much for joining us and talking about your research. Best of luck, and I'll be in touch in a couple of weeks.
Okay, lovely. Thank you.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Okay, fantastic. We are all done for today. Thank you all so much for joining me. I hope you enjoyed hearing about everyone's research as much as I did. If you've watched before, you'll know that these interview live streams are really the highlight of my year. When else do you get to talk to passionate PhD students about the things that they are lucky enough to research? But yes, we are finished for this week. Next week, we will be doing Assyriology, which is my personal favorite, and hopefully someone else's personal favorite as well. And it won't just be me being a massive nerd. It could just be me being a massive nerd. I'd be quite happy with that. So on the 15th of May, we're starting bright and early at 7 a.m. EDT. Please come and join me. And then on the 16th of May, we have 2 sessions starting at 10 a.m. and 1 p.m. Both of those are EDT. So I will see you then. Thank you all so much.